I'm going to try and talk about the new Fallout show. I say try because I literally finished watching it yesterday before writing this script. Usually when I watch things, I let them marinate on the brain for a little bit before forming a full opinion. I'm wanting to jump into this now for some pretty petty reasons. I've been avoiding watching and talking to people about the show, and I do want to do those things, and because I want to formulate my own thoughts without influence of others as much as possible, I can't. So I want to get my thoughts and everything down now and posted now so I can, join back into the discourse. Plus, I woke up extra early this morning and couldn't get back to sleep, so I thought, why not start writing? Brief history of me and this franchise. I am a big fan. Alongside Tomb Raider and Silent Hill, Fallout is a favourite franchise of mine. Though I would never claim to be an expert in any of those subjects, I started on Fallout 4 maybe 6 years ago. It did take me a while to get into it, but eventually it became a game I've played through multiple times, exploring different places and options. Hell, I've just bought the game for the third time. Originally secondhand on PS4, then I got the Game of the Year edition on PS4, and just yesterday I've bought the Fallout 4 Game of the Year edition again on Steam, as I'm kind of starting to make a transition more towards PC gaming. By the way, Steam has a Fallout franchise sale on right now with all the games, so if you're watching this before April the 19th, 2024, then maybe check it out. I also picked up New Vegas and Fallout 3 Game of the Year editions, which is also my third time buying each of those games. Controversially, my favourite of the whole franchise so far is Fallout 3, mostly for its atmosphere and brutal setting. The only main games in the series I've not played yet are Fallout 76, Tactics, and Fallout 2, though Fallout 2 is in my library and next to my list of games to play. I also really enjoy lore videos, gimmicky playthroughs online, and discussions on the franchise. Again, I have been avoiding these as to not contaminate my own impressions of this show, so let me express those and explore those impressions right now. I was so nervous about this show. Being a modern screen adaptation of a beloved franchise, and by Amazon of all companies. Wheel of Time, Rings of Power, anyone? I was expecting the worst of subversion, girl bossiness, and modern tropes that I was just going to cringe so much out of my skin to the point I would fit in well with the residents of Underworld. But I was pleasantly surprised. Are those elements there? Yeah, kind of, to a degree. But not as bad as feared, and I'll explain why later. Funny enough, I said in a live stream watch-along for the very first episode that there were two things I did not want in the show: retconning and the story having implications on the wider Fallout universe. These things also happen in the show, but so far have not killed the show for me. By the way, there's going to be heavy spoilers, and they start now, so if you haven't seen the show and are meaning to, then I would just switch off the video. Starting with the high points, it's visually a perfect adaptation of the games, the Bethesda games specifically, but I was just so immersed in just swimming in the world with my eyes. The sets are absolutely on point, some straight from the games itself, costuming is great, and just all the little bits of fan service and the props and the presentation. Got chems, power armor, the advertisements. It feels just 100% part of the Fallout universe. Also, the makeup for the ghouls and the digital representation of some of the creatures cannot go without mention. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Well, perhaps gorgeous is not the correct word, but you know what I mean. The tone and the atmosphere are on point. There is an event in episode 1 that can only be described as an absolute bloodbath. People are stabbed, slashed, eyes are gouged, and heads are exploded. All play to the smooth sounds of some Enchanted Evening by the Castells, and it is just an amazing sequence. The soundtrack is excellent throughout. We've got Johnny Cash, Dina Washington, and of course the Ink Spots providing a lot of the tracks. The show just perfectly embodies the unique blend of retro-futuristic, post-apocalyptic, and some tones of like the gravity of the human condition, and of course the dark comedy the franchise is known for. The cast and characters are great for the most part. Ella Purnell plays the idealistic and naive Lucy to absolute perfection. The happy-go-lucky Vault Dweller thrown into the savagery of the surface world on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Kyle MacLachlan is also there, who is just one of my favourite actors, playing Lucy's father. He was a welcome addition, despite what happens with the character later. Aaron Moten plays the unsure and troubled, aspiring Knight Maximus very well, although, and this is not the actor's fault, I feel more could have been done with his segments to flesh out the Brotherhood of Steel, and perhaps some more of his comic moments are a bit overplayed and just going a bit long. The standard for me out the main cast is probably the same as many others. It's Walter Goggins is the Ghoul/Cooper. Through flashbacks, we get to see the well-meaning but conflicted Hollywood star Cooper, countered by the current disfigured Jaded and the brutal modern bounty hunter, the Ghoul. He has just the coolest moments, he has the most unique perspective on the show, having experienced the world for over 2 centuries. The actor himself just brings such gravitas to this, like, overstop crazy world. He's, without doubt, my favourite of the main 3. There's also an excellent supporting cast. Lucy's brother Norm could easily have been the submissive, cowardly one of the ensemble, but he rapidly grows into a very proactive force in his own right amongst the residents of Vault 33. All the Vault residents, in fact, are quite interesting for the time that they are on screen. I may discuss them all in future, but I'm trying to keep this video relatively brief. I will mention another minor yet important character, paradoxically, but I'll do so later as he pertains to some of the questionable elements of the show. But for the most part, we have just some damn good characters with a great cast supporting them. So, where am I less confident about the product? Well, it's mostly in the story and its implications on the wider Fallout universe, in a canon and in a meta sense. I'm fine with the story on the whole, the separate and intersecting journeys of the 3 mains. Again, I feel some of the Brotherhood stuff is just a little lacking somehow, maybe a bit underdeveloped. As a player of the games, I know who they are and what their deal generally is, depending on the chapter, of course, but I'm not sure that who they are would be fully conveyed to a new audience. I felt the need to exposit a bit to my partner while we were watching. Maybe there is just a bit something missing up in their setup. Likewise with the Enclave, we only see their world very briefly in episode 2. They are one of the major factions of the Fallout world, and they've not been seen, at least chronologically, since Fallout 3's Broken Steel DLC. They were the primary antagonists of Fallout 2 and 3, and just very interesting. They're the fascist remnants of an old American shadow government with the best technology and just a very ugly ideology. For a time, we follow Wilzig, played by the often wonderful Michael Emerson, an Enclave scientist with a heart of gold. Maybe not heart of gold, but he has a change of heart at least in some ways. He's great for the brief time that we spend with him. Alive anyway, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. He has a nice fireside interaction with Lucy early in episode 2, where he talks about the improvements mutation has had on the cockroach, turning it into the larger radroach. Which is interesting coming from a society with a genocidal drive for what they perceive as uncontaminated purity. Like, how does observations like this about improvements post-war reconcile with that, like, much more narrow, extreme worldview? Besides some hints, actually, come to think about it, very little is seen of the Enclave. It just seems a bit of a missed opportunity. Though, if we are talking Fallout factions done dirty, well, here is the big one. And this is the last chance for huge spoilers. Okay? Just a moment. Okay. The new California Republic, probably the biggest organized government of the wasteland, is no more. They have been completely wiped off the map. This is likely going to be the biggest sticking point of the show for most fans, and where it may become irredeemable for many. The NCR are such an established power in the universe, with their origins going back to Shady Sands in the very first Fallout game. Speaking of Shady Sands, it has also been nuked into oblivion. Oof. Not even sure what to start with this one. This goes a bit beyond just a big plot point, though I can summarize just from looking at some of YouTube thumbnails, this has had an expected reaction. To have such an integral part of multiple games in post-war America essentially killed off screen is like, well, what if Doctor Who just destroyed the Time Lords off screen in a sudden, unsatisfying manner? Or what if Star Trek Federation just suddenly vanished from the universe and collapsed due to a off-screen Or what if after Return of the Jedi, the Empire came back and destroyed the New Republic without explanation and... fuck's sake, this is just such one of those modern tropes that I was kind of worried about going into this. This is such a WTF in this setting. Not only has Shady Sands been nuked into a crater, this has somehow led to the complete vanishing of the NCR. There is no organised holdout. I mean, I'm sure if London vanished off the map, its impact would be incalculable. But I'm pretty sure England would still be a thing. Though when the time comes, brothers and sisters, the North shall unite and overthrow our southern overlords and initiate a new age of... There are remnants of the NCR, but they seem so sparse as to be basically non-existent. Those remnants have issues of their own, believe me. This was essentially the closest thing to a nation-state for the past 100 years, and it's as if even traces of it have been scrubbed from the world. Which, to get a little conspiratorial, may actually be the case in a meta sense as well. For those of you who don't know, there is a bit of a divide in the fandom. Not with everyone, mind you, but there are those who gravitate more towards the pre- and post-Bethesda acquisition of the Fallout property. One of the common observations is a more immersive and better sense of world building and role-play mechanics in the original 2 Fallout games. There is a feeling by many that Bethesda don't quite get these elements as well as the original studio did, and I can't argue with that, even though my favourite game in the series is a Bethesda entry. The original game takes place less than 100 years after the nuclear war, so there's still tons of ruins and destruction with brutal struggles in that setting. Fallout 2 takes place just under 100 years after the first game, and within that time there's been quite a lot of strides in cleanup and rebuilding of civilization. It's basically a new world and new civilizations are forming, including like the beginnings of the NCR. And then when Bethesda acquired Fallout from Interplay and made Fallout 3, considering that Fallout 3 is only supposed to be set about 30 years after Fallout 2, with the world being rebuilt and things, it's as if there's just been no progression at all on the east coast of America in terms of cleanup or reconstruction for the past 200 years. It's the same for Fallout 4. For some reason, the Bethesda titles are just really stuck in the ruined world setting, despite the passage of time and the rise of like new nations. It's a well-known criticism of their games, and as a fan of those games, I do agree. Honestly, if those games were set just even 100 years earlier in the timeline, it would alleviate much of these contradictions, and gotta say the same about the Amazon series. To wear my tinfoil hat for a moment, the destruction of the NCR in this show could be an intentional jab by Bethesda themselves on the previous developers and its outspoken fans. I know this sounds a bit crazy, but just keep in mind that what is often touted as the best game in the Fallout series is Fallout New Vegas, which was essentially a rushed side project published by Bethesda, but it was worked on by some of the original developers of the first 2 Fallout games and harkens back a lot more to that style. I could imagine the love that fans have for New Vegas as opposed to the criticism, especially in hindsight, of Fallouts 3, 4, and 76, may stick in Bethesda's craw a bit. Also, the NCR are a major player of New Vegas as well. Quick look on YouTube has also produced this interestingly titled result. Now, I have not watched this video yet, but I can hazard a guess at the premise. Honestly, if this was just 10 years ago, I'd probably not even entertain the ideas of a company being so petty in this way. But this is 2024, and we've had a decade of subversion, reinterpretation, and a general attitude of fuck the fans in basically all our entertainment media. So I would not put the decision to kill off the NCR and show its survivors in a weird and hostile light as an intentional statement on behalf of the current franchise holder. It's definitely possible in my mind. While we are discussing controversy and modern day messaging, let's go right into the perceived wokeness, for lack of a better term, which has been kind of thrown towards the series and some of the initial reactions I've seen. Socialist activism against the evil capitalist system, a woman leaving her evil patriarchal husband for a happy, idyllic, heavily suggested homosexual relationship in the final episode. There is a he, him, they, them in the cast, and our main character is a Mary Sue girl boss, and this destroys everything about the show and the universe, and no, it really doesn't. None of these observations I've seen are completely accurate, or even if they are, go against the spirit of the franchise, really. Fallout's one of the few franchises where politics, sexuality, identity, and society have long been aspects of it. To varying degrees, of course, and the main story always comes first, but it's never been completely removed from some of these, other subjects. I say this as someone who would not be considered particularly progressive, if we were to label it that, though regressive is a more suitable term a lot of times. For the politics, for example, Fallout is a world where a capitalist/communist Cold War went hot and both sides destroyed each other and destroyed the planet. There is criticism on both extremes throughout, and just because aspects of Western society can be poked at, and often it should, especially the kind of capitalism presented in these more extreme forms in the way the culture presents them, it doesn't automatically make those who question such systems and ways die-in-the-wool red revolutionary. In a show where there are moments, especially in flashback, that nod to McCarthyism, the paranoia of the second Red Scare, which, in my opinion, wasn't always unnecessarily uncalled for, and the critiques of the evil capitalist system, well, all that stuff's always been there in the games, and as a capitalist myself, for lack of a better word, these extremes are valid concerns about power and giving our power to the ultra-wealthy. All this is in-universe and perfectly applicable, though I admit having the idealists being Hollywood types is definitely in keeping with California's self-flating smugness, especially in modern media. There's possibly another example of the primary female villain being the actual good guy in the end, which is another pretty tiresome trope that's cropped up in the past few years. Although, despite her intentions and higher ideals, I'm not convinced that you're necessarily supposed to think of them as the good guys in actuality. Maybe it is left up a bit to the audience. I'm just saying the coercion and manipulation of a naive young woman and the slaughter of her innocent friends and family is not immediately done by some sense of altruism. The homosexual relationship in the final episode is heavily implied, but even if it was explicit, so there are gay characters throughout this series. In fact, you can play your character as gay if you wish, in the later entries especially. It's not really a big deal, as some could make the argument about the happier, dreamier gay relationship being in a more revolutionary setting against the patriarchal order of the old regime being some sort of activist message, which, maybe it is. But it is 2024, and activists usually lack such subtlety, and honestly, this might be a bit more of a reach. I'd say the primary issue with the husband being, well, an evil eugenicist partly to mass murder to be the more egregious issue here, rather than just a perceived jab at the patriarchy. Let's get on to the he, him, they, them. Hope I don't mispronounce this. Celia Mendez-Jones, who plays Maximus's friend in the Brotherhood and Steel, who's one of the other aspiring Brotherhood squires. Their inclusion in this military-like organization does not affect a damn thing, okay? However the actor wants to identify is their business, no matter what I or anyone else could feel one way or the other about it. The character's fine, nothing is explicitly said in story from what I recall about their identity, and the Brotherhood is comprised of both men and women, despite its name, and I'm not sure if someone's identity would really factor in whether or not they can fight mutants or pick up salvage. As long as they can hold their own, for me it's a non-issue, and I'm sure for the Brotherhood of Steel as well. A final criticism I will comment on, which I have seen, is the assumption that Lucy is going to be some kind of Mary Sue girl boss. I was also quite concerned about this. Again, the modern world has just ruined so much of entertainment. that, like, a decade ago, I probably would think of nothing about having a female protagonist in something, but now, because of the sludge with a message, which is about as subtle as a point-blank strike from a fucking Fat Man minion nuke that we've been served up recently, my mind just immediately wonders if any woman in any show who's put front and center is just going to be another vessel for the writer's hang-ups, and I'm pleased to say that is not the case with Lucy at all. Lucy is an idealistically driven and determined young woman, a true believer of the personal excellence and the goodness of the vault system she grew up in, which of course takes a serious hit, as does her body in more ways than one, during her wedding day. After performing some nuclear fusion of her own with her new match, she gets the ever-loving shit beat out of her, kicked, stabbed, and almost murdered by the man that was warming her up internally just moments ago. She would have been killed if not for the intervention of others in that madness. Throughout her journey, her positive attitude and belief in the innate goodness of people that has just been drilled into her entire life is severely tested and weathered. There is a running theme of change, facing up to the ugly realities, and maybe even some commentary on growing up throughout the show. She's not always right, she can be ignorant of situations, and is nearly murdered for that more than once. There are some things she's proficient at, like hand-to-hand combat, electronics, and other useful skills. It is shown, however, that this is all part of her education and upbringing in the culture of Vault 33. It's not a case that she is just inexplicably brilliant. Like, she does actually work for things, and she equally suffers for things, like, throughout the story. She's not a girl boss or a Mary Sue. She's just a golly gee likable protagonist. That's about all I'm going to say on the show for right now. I could have mentioned other characters, issues with canon, etc. There's lots we could talk about and discuss, but I just wanted to get my thoughts out while the experience is still fairly fresh. I know I likely spent most of this video addressing negatives, but I really did enjoy the first season and definitely will be checking out season 2 if it happens. The show does seem to be generally quite well received, so that is a possibility. I just felt I had to address some of the criticisms and negativity, partly because anyone looking for reactions, especially on YouTube, will tend to come across criticisms and negative reactions first, and hey, negativity sells, and I'm not immune with either. So, if you were to ask me right now how I rate Amazon Prime's Fallout, I'd give it a good 7.5 to 8 out of 10. Of course, subject to revision. Enjoyment may vary depending on your relationship with certain games, or if you're a fan of the games at all. My partner enjoyed the show a lot, and they haven't played any of the games, so there's that. And yeah, I enjoyed the show too, so I guess this is just my salvo into the war of opinions, which is fandom. And war never changes.